The people in the window. The small town of Glenwood was known for its charm, quaint houses with white picket fences, children playing in the streets, and the friendly smiles of neighbors greeting each other. But in an unassuming two-story house at the end of Maple Street, an unsettling mystery lurked behind the curtains. Megan had just moved to Glenwood, eager for a fresh start after a messy divorce. The house was affordable, and despite its slightly worn exterior, it felt like a perfect fit. On her first night, as she settled down with a cup of tea, she noticed something peculiar out of the corner of her eye, a flicker of movement in the window across the street. Peering through the glass, she saw a figure standing in the dim light, staring directly at her. It was an older woman, her face obscured by shadows. Megan quickly dismissed it as a trick of the light and went about her evening, but unease crept into her mind. The next night, as rain pelted the window panes, Megan felt an inexplicable pull to look outside again. This time, the woman was joined by a man, both standing eerily still, their eyes fixed on her home. The unsettling feeling in Megan's stomach intensified. She couldn't shake the sense that they were watching her. Determined to ignore the strange occurrences, Megan focused on unpacking boxes and settling in. But the following nights became a ritual. Each evening, she noticed more figures appearing in the window across the street, sometimes a child, sometimes a teenager, but always staring. They never moved, never spoke, just observed her with hollow eyes that seemed to penetrate her very soul. One particularly stormy night, the power flickered and went out, plunging her house into darkness. Megan lit a few candles and decided to distract herself by binge-watching a new series. But every time she glanced out the window, she saw them, now more numerous, their silhouettes multiplying in the dim glow of her candlelight. The air felt heavy with an unspoken tension, as if they were waiting for something. Unable to take it any longer, Megan decided to confront her neighbors. She stepped outside, the cold air biting at her skin. As she approached the house, the figures vanished from the window, leaving her staring at an empty black space. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer. The silence was deafening. Feeling foolish, she retreated back to her home, shaking off the chill. That night, she tried to convince herself it was all in her head. But sleep eluded her, and she spent the hours tossing and turning, haunted by the memory of those eyes staring back at her. The next day, Megan decided to visit the town library, hoping to learn more about her neighbors. The librarian, an elderly woman with kind eyes, noticed Megan's distress and asked what was troubling her. When Megan mentioned the figures in the window, the librarian's expression shifted, a shadow crossing her face. "Those people, they've been there for years," she whispered. "They don't come out. They just watch." Megan felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean? Why don't they come out?" The librarian hesitated, glancing around as if afraid to speak. "It said they're trapped, cursed to forever watch the living. Some say they were once residents of that house, but something happened to them, something terrible." Megan's heart raced. "What happened?" The librarian leaned closer. "No one knows for sure. But if you see them watching you, it means they want something. You mustn't engage with them." That evening, the fear became unbearable. Megan locked all her doors and windows, but as night fell, she felt their presence looming. She sat on her couch, heart pounding, trying to focus on anything but the window. But then, she heard a knock, a soft, persistent sound coming from the glass. Gathering her courage, she slowly turned towards the window. The figures were back, closer than ever. They were no longer just silhouettes, she could see their faces now, pale, hollow eyes and mouths stretched in silent screams. Panic surged through her, and she stumbled backward, knocking over a candle that ignited the curtains. Flames erupted, and in the chaos, Megan ran for the door. As she reached for the handle, she glanced back at the window. The figures were no longer watching, they were now reaching out, their hands pressed against the glass, faces twisted in anguish. They were no longer trapped, they were coming for her. Megan burst through the door and sprinted into the night, ignoring the heat of the flames behind her. She could hear their whispers carried by the wind, calling her name, begging her to return. But she didn't stop running until she reached the town square, gasping for breath. The fire consumed her house, but as the townspeople gathered, all eyes turned to her. No one spoke of the people in the window, they simply watched her with pity. In the aftermath, Megan learned that the house had been empty for years, that the figures had been seen by others before her. And though the fire had destroyed her home, the whispers of the people in the window would haunt her forever, a reminder that some doors should never be opened, and some windows should never be looked through. The following days, as she tried to rebuild her life, Megan could still feel their presence lurking in the corners of her mind. On sleepless nights, she'd hear soft tapping, like fingers against glass, and wonder if she had truly escaped or if they were merely waiting for another chance to claim her. In Glenwood, the charming houses and friendly smiles masked a darker reality. And for Megan, the real horror was knowing that the people in the window would always be watching, waiting for the moment she might return. After the fire, Megan thought she could leave the horrors of Glenwood behind. She rented a small apartment in a neighboring town, hoping the fresh start would cleanse her mind of the nightmares that haunted her. But no matter how hard she tried, the shadows of the people in the window lingered at the edges of her consciousness, taunting her with memories of their hollow eyes and anguished faces. It started innocently enough. A few weeks after settling in, she'd wake up to find the lights flickering or feel a strange chill in the air. But soon, it escalated. Near-death experiences began to plague her life, slipping on ice while walking to her car, nearly choking on food, and once, a close call with a car that swerved just in time. Each incident left her shaken, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. One night, as she lay in bed, the oppressive silence of her new apartment was shattered by a soft tapping at her window. Heart racing, she peered through the blinds. The glow of the street lamp illuminated her view, and there, standing just beyond the glass, were the figures, the people she thought she had escaped. Their faces were distorted, eyes wide and pleading, as if they were trying to communicate something vital. Megan stumbled back, breathless. "This can't be happening," she whispered to herself. But as the days passed, the tapping grew more frequent, becoming a haunting lullaby that beckoned her closer. She moved her bed away from the window, but the feeling of being watched was inescapable. At work, she found it hard to concentrate, her mind plagued by visions of the figures standing outside her window. She confided in her coworker, Sarah, who suggested it might be stress-related. "You need to let go of what happened," Sarah said gently, but Megan knew that wasn't possible. Then one evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, she returned home to find her apartment eerily dark. The electricity had gone out. Frantically, she fumbled for her phone, using the dim light to navigate through the rooms. As she passed by the living room window, she froze. There they were again, the figures, now closer than ever, their faces pressed against the glass, mouths moving as if they were trying to say something. Megan's heart raced as she backed away, but the shadows seemed to grow in size, consuming the light around her. The whispering began, a soft chorus that filled her ears, drowning out her thoughts. It was a language she couldn't understand, but it resonated deep within her, and she felt drawn to the window. With trembling hands, she opened the window just a crack. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The figures stopped moving, their eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the opening, and she felt a cold hand wrap around her wrist, pulling her toward the window. Panic surged through her, and she fought against the unseen force. "Let me go," she screamed, but the whispering grew louder, filling her mind with a cacophony of voices. In that moment, a blinding flash of light surged through the room. Megan closed her eyes, feeling herself being yanked from the edge of reality. When she opened them again, she was standing outside, surrounded by the figures from the window. They were no longer just shadows, they were corporeal, their forms solid and grotesque. "Megan," a voice echoed, a chilling mix of familiarity and dread. It was the older woman, her face now twisted into a malevolent grin. "You interacted with us. Now you belong to us." Megan's heart sank as she realized the truth. Her near-death experiences weren't coincidences, they were warnings. The moment she acknowledged them, she had become part of their cursed existence. They were no longer confined to the house, they had absorbed her energy, their malevolence feeding off her fear. In a desperate attempt to escape, Megan turned to run, but the figures closed in around her. "You'll never escape us," they whispered in unison, voices blending into a haunting melody. Just as she thought she would be enveloped in their grasp, she stumbled backward and fell to the ground. The world around her began to blur and fade, the whispers growing distant. In an instant, she found herself back in her apartment, gasping for breath, drenched in sweat. But as she looked around, a chilling realization washed over her. The figures were still there, watching her from the corners of the room. They hadn't left, they never had. Megan glanced around frantically, trying to find a way to escape. Suddenly, she spotted her reflection in the mirror. But it wasn't just her own reflection staring back, it was the faces of the figures, their features contorted with rage and hunger. And then she understood, she was not the one who had escaped, she had become one of them. The people in the window had found their way into her life, and now they were trapped within her, feeding on her essence. With a scream that echoed through the empty room, Megan realized the truth. She was the new watcher, forever bound to the house and the cursed figures, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to pass by her window. As the darkness closed in around her, the whispers began anew, and Megan joined the chorus of the damned, forever part of the haunting legend of the people in the window.